to be able to feel it.
Adrian Nuwey just unveiled a car so radical that the FIA is already trying to figure out whether parts of it are even legal. Nothing on the 2026 grid looks like the AMR26. Rear suspension components double as downforce generators. The side pods are barely visible, and when Snort's rival team bosses watched it roll out at Barcelona on January 29th, one of them said Newey had placed wishbones where they have no business being. The part that should worry Aston Martin fans is the timeline. Newey started this project 4 months behind every other team, ran only 65 laps at Barcelona, fewer than brand new entrant Cadillac, and the Honda engine strapped to the back has never turned a competitive lap. Either this is the boldest design play in modern F1, or it is a £150 million miscalculation. Understanding why the AMR26 matters requires understanding the patent behind it, because Newey has pulled this move before, and every single time the FIA had to rewrite the rulebook in response. 1992 is where the patent starts. Newey designed the Williams FWW14B with active suspension, traction control, and a semi-automatic gearbox, and that car won 10 out of 16 races. The FIA's response was to ban all 3 systems the following season, not because they were dangerous, but because one designer figured out how to use them better than the entire rest of the field. That was the first time the rulemakers changed course because of Adrian Nuwey. It would not be the last. Over at McLaren, his MP420 in 2005 won 10 races, more than the championship-winning Renault, and many people in the paddock still consider it the quickest car Newey ever put together. Both titles slipped away on mechanical failures, not on pace. Red Bull is where the pattern turned relentless. The RB6, the RB7, the RB8, the RB9, 4 straight constructors' titles running from 2010 to 2013. And each of those cars pushed a different regulatory boundary. Exhaust-blown diffusers on the RB7 routed hot exhaust gases over the rear diffuser to generate extra downforce. And the FIA restricted that technique for 2012. Knew he found a workaround and kept winning. Red Bull's front wings faced repeated investigation for illegal flexibility, so the FIA tightened deflection tests multiple times. Newey kept passing them while still extracting an aero benefit nobody else could match. By 2014, even the mandatory onboard camera became an aero tool. Newey integrated it into the nose structure for an aerodynamic advantage nobody else had spotted, and the FIA banned that too, forcing Red Bull to change their car mid-season. 21 wins out of 22 races. That was the RB19 in 2023, a 95.5% win rate that broke the record set by the McLaren MP 4/4 in 1988. The car driven by Senna, the RB19 made an entire season predictable, and still nobody on the grid could figure out how to copy it. 12 Constructors' Championships, 14 Drivers' Championships, over 223 Grand Prix victories. Newey is the only designer in F1 history to claim constructors' titles with 3 separate teams at Williams, McLaren, and Red Bull. Every one of those numbers traces back to the same drawing board. A record like that explains why Newey leaving Red Bull sent shockwaves through the entire sport, and the circumstances of his departure explain why the AMR26 exists at all. The decision crystallised over the 2024 Japanese Grand Prix weekend in April. The her misconduct investigation had unsettled Red Bull's internal culture, and the October 2022 death of founder Dietrich Mateschitz, who had personally shielded Newey's working environment, removed the one relationship that kept him anchored. Power struggles between Red Bull's Thai and Austrian ownership factions were intensifying. Newey wanted out. Red Bull confirmed the departure on May 1st, 2024, just ahead of the Miami Grand Prix. Car design work stopped immediately, and he spent roughly 10 months on gardening leave, finishing the RB17 hypercar. Ferrari pursued him hard with talks reaching advanced stages, but team principal Fred Verse would not grant the operational freedom New demanded. Verse put it bluntly, saying Newey's vision for his own role did not match what Ferrari had in mind. Ferrari wanted a designer who fit their structure. Newey wanted to reshape the structure. Aston Martin offered him both. Lawrence Stroll announced the signing on September 10, 2024, at a dedicated event at the AMR Technology campus. And the financial terms reflected just how badly he wanted Newey: £30 million per year, including bonuses on a 5-year deal worth roughly £150 million total. The detail that separated Aston Martin from every other suitor was an equity stake reported at around 2.5%. Ownership in an F1 team is something no employer had ever offered Newey before. Not Williams, not McLaren, not Red Bull. Newey described Stroll as the only properly active team owner in modern F1, and the fact that the factory sits in England rather than in Maranello did not hurt either, since Newey has never been willing to relocate abroad. Work began officially on March 1st, 2025, and by November of that year, the role had already expanded. Newey took over as team principal, his first time holding that title in a career spanning over 3 decades, replacing Andy Cowell, who shifted to Chief Strategy Officer. Every team Newey has joined has gotten the same treatment: a philosophy of pushing regulations to the edge of what is allowed, not breaking rules, but finding the spaces between what the regulations say and what the regulation writers actually meant. The FIA employs roughly 3 aerodynamicists. The 10 F1 teams collectively employ around 800. That ratio has favoured Newey for his entire career. The AMR26 proves that approach has not changed. Bare carbon fibre rolled out at Barcelona, and the rear suspension immediately dominated every technical conversation. Newey mounted the upper wishbone at an impossibly high position and anchored its trailing arm directly to the rear wing support pylons, which means the suspension components themselves act as downforce generators, filling the exact role that the now banded rear beam wing used to play. A former Aston Martin strategist described it as Newey, forcing the mechanical side of the car into positions other designers would refuse to accept, trading suspension geometry for aerodynamic performance. And honestly, it is the most Newey thing imaginable. This is the same approach he used with exhaust-blown diffusers on the RB7, exploiting a grey area between what counts as a structural component and what counts as an aeros surface. The FIA restricted diffusers for 2012, and Newey moved on to the next loophole. Thin short-side pods create an enormous undercut that produces what analysts call a double floor effect, with a cavernous gap between the side pod bottom and the actual floor. The cooling inlet uses an underbite design where the lower lip extends past the upper lip, effectively turning the inlet itself into another aeros surface. A wide nose with a hollowed-out pelican-style belly runs the full length of the car, and a triangular airbox with small horns echoes his McLaren-era designs. The whole car sits at a visibly high rake angle, rear higher than the front, and that is the philosophy that defined Red Bull's dominance from 2010 through 2023. No other team on the 2026 grid has committed to rake this aggressively. Newey described his own design with characteristic restraint, saying he never views any of his cars as aggressive and that he simply pursues whatever direction feels right. The AMR26, he admitted, carries quite a few features that have not necessarily been done before, and the team chose to prioritise development headroom over raw launch day performance. A car with room to grow, not one that arrives optimised and stalls. Floor edge cuts tell the same story. The AMR26 carries more 45 degrees cuts along the floor than any competitor, a technique for managing the turbulent weight from the rear tyres. Up front, the pushrod suspension mounts the upper wishbone as high as the chassis allows, carving out aerodynamic corridors underneath the car that other design teams chose to leave alone. Regulation overhauls are where Newey is at his most dangerous because everyone else guesses while he works from first principles. The rear suspension concept on the AMR26 is not bold for the sake of spectacle. It solves a specific problem created by the 2026 regulations, the loss of the rear beam wing, in a way that no other team attempted. When roughly 3 FIA aerodynamists are checking the work of approximately 800 across the 10 teams, the math has always favoured the person who spots the grey area first, and Newey has been that person for over 30 years. Melbourne arrives on March 6th through 8th, 2026. Less than 5 weeks from right now, 26 world titles across 3 teams and 3 decades. What do you think? Write your opinion in the comments below.